Of today's announcement, let's bring in CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver live for us in Ottawa. Annie, good morning to you. So the Alberta government and Ottawa expected to unveil details of this new energy deal later today. What are you learning so far?
Hi, Marcia. Nice to talk to you this morning. So we know that this memorandum of understanding is going to be announced in just a few hours with the Prime Minister side by side with Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta. Now, this is something that we've been hearing about for several weeks now. Their negotiations have been ongoing. The Prime Minister and the Premier described these talks all along as constructive. And yesterday, the Prime Minister all but confirmed that there will be talk of a pipeline and a framework of a pipeline in the memorandum of understanding. What he said in question period in response was that this memorandum of understanding will set out, quote, the necessary conditions, but not the, quote, sufficient conditions for a major pipeline project. So what does that mean exactly? Well, what we're, hearing here is the Prime Minister has said previously that he would potentially be in support of a pipeline if the BC government and coastal First Nations were on side with that. We know that there are a lot of coastal First Nations who do not want a pipeline, Marcia. They are strongly opposed and concerned about the environmental aspects, concerned that a potential oil spill would devastate not only the wildlife, but their communities as well. David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, has also said that he is staunchly opposed to a pipeline, that he doesn't want one in his province, and he doesn't want to be big-footed by the federal government. Of course, a pipeline is within their jurisdiction. So what it seems like this framework is going to do, and what we're hearing about, is that if the Alberta government meets certain criteria that will be laid out in more detail in this memorandum of understanding, then the federal government would sort of put its political capital behind it and get this project potentially through. But the Prime Minister has said he wants British Columbia and the First Nations on side. The question is, what happens if those two are not on side? Will the federal government go ahead with the project regardless, given that it's in their jurisdiction? Or is this project essentially just dead before it even gets underway? So that's really what this memorandum of understanding, I think the big takeaway from it is going to be. However, the Prime Minister has said, look, this is not just about one project. This is about Canada's economy, strengthening the economy, growing the Canadian economy, and removing a reliance from the United States. Because, of course, this pipeline would potentially carry 1 million barrels of oil per day to the BC coast, and that would be destined for Asian markets. Right now, the vast majority of our oil is going to the United States, and the Prime Minister has talked about all along that he wants to remove the reliance from the U.S. And last thing, I know I've been talking for a long time. While there is a lot of talk about the pipeline, one of the things is that this memorandum of understanding is going to say that in order for any type of pipeline to move ahead, what we're being told is that Alberta will have to meet much more stringent conditions around emissions, so more carbon capture and potentially a higher industrial carbon tax. So there will be some kind of emissions-related targets here and changes that the Alberta government would have to meet if a pipeline were to ever go forward.
Okay, we're following along. Great details. No, all good. I'm just curious then if you can talk to us about the issues around these oil tankers. Premier Smith is urging Ottawa to terminate an oil tanker ban on the West Coast. Can you expand on that and what we're hearing from the British Columbia Premier, David Eby, in response to that, Andy?
Sure. So let's look at the two sides. So the Alberta government says that this tanker ban that was put in place in 2019 is essentially preventing the oil sands, the Alberta economy from growing because it limits the amount of crude oil that can be carried. It's a maximum of 12,500 metric tons of crude oil that can be carried in a tanker, and there's a ban on these tankers from the northern tip of Vancouver Island to Alaska. So the Alberta government and many in the oil sector say, look, we cannot have any type of a new pipeline unless we have a way to carry this oil to market. And while this tanker ban is in place, the oil sector, the gas sector, the Alberta government says we can't move more oil unless this tanker ban is removed. If you talk to the Alberta government, you talk to a lot of coastal First Nations, you talk to a lot of environmental groups, they say that this is a precedent pristine area that has not seen tankers before, and that any type of oil spill here would be absolutely devastating for the wildlife, for the communities, and would be very hard to recover from. So the BC government is saying, look, we don't want tanker traffic. We don't want this pristine area of our country at risk at all. The counter to that, again, from a lot of the people in the oil sector is they say, look, we're not having the same spills that we saw in the 90s of birds with oil around them. These oil and gas sector executives and industry experts are saying that tankers are built differently. They're double hulled now. There's a lot more safety and security, a lot more training, a lot more guidance for the people who are driving these tankers. And so they're saying, look, the safety regulations are much higher. The likelihood of a spill is much lower than it used to be. But on the other side, again, BC government, coastal First Nations environmental groups say, we don't care if the risk of a spill is lower. There is still a risk. And all it takes is one spill in this beautiful area north of Vancouver Island to Alaska. One spill would be absolutely devastating and would be very hard to recover from. It appears that what the government is considering doing, or what we're being told, is some kind of carve-out. So what exactly a carve-out means here is kind of unclear, but what everyone will sort of tell you is that if a pipeline is going to be built, you need a carve-out from this tanker ban. Otherwise, you can't get the crude oil to market, and then a pipeline is essentially useless.
Gotcha. Okay, Annie, thanks for all that. We're going to check in with you throughout the day. This is our top story here at home, and CTV News Chief Political Correspondent Vashi Kapelos will